Relief to Recovery, the American Rescue Plan, and what's next for the Granite State. This event is sponsored by Rights and Democracy New Hampshire, 603 Forward, New Hampshire Youth Movement, and Granite State Progress. We all are glad to have you all here tonight. I know you all are starting to do it, but please introduce yourselves if you haven't in the chat with your name, your town, and of course your pronouns. My name is Ed Taylor, and I serve as the secretary on the Rights and Democracy's board of directors. I'm extremely excited to be with you all this evening to dig into the details of what we've won for our state and our country with the recently passed American Rescue Plan, and to discuss what we can all do next to build on this victory, to move from relief to recovery and advance a more just economic, social, and political system for our people and for future generations. The American Rescue Plan, which is bringing nearly $2 trillion in relief at a time when millions of Americans are struggling to pay their bills, where our schools, businesses, and state and local governments desperately need support, passed because working people of all races stood up, turned out, and demanded a government that worked for all of us. It is a significant down payment from Democrats to working families. It shows that if we continue organizing, we can continue winning big changes. Over the last year, Black, white, and brown working people have come together to care for one another. We've stood up time and again to demand a government that cares for all of us, no matter what we look like or where we live. While some politicians try to pit us against one another, pointing the finger at those who marched for racial justice and demanded relief for working people, we stood together against voter suppression, police brutality, and some leaders' callous disregard for our health and livelihoods. This bill shows that when working people of all races come together for change, we can make our leaders deliver for us. But as we've seen throughout our nation's history, it doesn't happen unless we stand up and make our voices heard. Tonight, we'll be joined by state and national leaders to break down for us what the American Rescue Plan entails, where the funding will go, who will benefit, and how it will address the intersecting crisis we face, from childhood poverty and food insecurity to our struggling public schools, unemployment, and healthcare inequalities. We'll also be hearing directly from leaders of our organizations about how they've been impacted and what they're doing to continue advancing justice in their communities. Now, before I pass it to Hannah Bristol, I'd like to introduce a fellow Rights and Democracy member from Laconia, Dana Heckett. Dana is a mother and a leader of the Lakes Region RAD chapter. The pandemic has caused hardship for Dana over the past year, as it has for so many of us. But she's also found deep meaning in beginning to organize for human rights here in New Hampshire. Welcome, Dana. Thank you for joining us.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. And I will tell you, it is humbling to be here with so many amazing voices to be heard. So I will keep this pretty short. I am really here tonight. I also will say my kiddo might be popping in and out, who knows? So surprise. I'm really here tonight, not as a leader but really just as a mom, somebody who this pandemic has been really tough for. And I'm not unique. My story isn't amazing. I am honestly, it could be so much worse. So, I think that I'm really lucky for that, but I also think that it's important for us to be able to share these stories and normalize it. The fact is so many of us are struggling right now, and financially is right, many of us. So let's normalize talking about this. Bear with me, sorry. So what did this relief package mean to me and my daughter? So the answer to that is everything. just a quick background. At the beginning of the pandemic, I had to go out on a leave of absence from my job. I've been a vet tech for the last 15 years. When Ella's daycare shut down, I stayed home with her. I'm so sorry. Hold on one second. Oh, okay. I love you. Oh, I didn't mute myself. Okay, so thank you. Okay, so I've been home with my kiddo since last May. I had a return to work date when she had a spot available when daycare reopened of September 1st. I received termination paperwork from my employer a few weeks before that. No phone call, just the mail. So that definitely changed where I was at. Whereas for the first stimulus and the extra unemployment money, I was paying down hospital bills, I was paying down credit cards. In retrospect, I should have been saving all that money. I just, I thought I was going back to work really soon. So then when I got terminated, unemployment went down. I will say that here are the things that I faced. My car got repoed. That's an awesome thing to say out loud. I am filing for bankruptcy. But here's the thing, it could be so much worse. My family owns the house that I live in. And so the fact is I know that there will be a roof over my head. I know there will be a roof over my daughter's head. And there are so many people who are not able to say that right now. And that's why it's important for me to share this, because, that's why it's so important for me to work for those people who don't have the generational wealth that I have, the people who do not have what I have in my corner. And so as rough as it has been for me the last year, it has been so much rougher for others out there. And I will say, without these stimulus packages, it would be way, way worse. So on that note, I'm going to leave it at that. Also, I got a kiddo coming back in. Thank you for hearing me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. It's incredibly impactful and so important. Thank you. Hey. Hey. A quick reminder for folks, if any questions for our speakers, please drop them in the chat for us. Next, I'm excited to introduce Hannah Bristol. Hannah is the Associate Director of the White House Office of Public Engagement, where she works with youth progressives and the LGBTQ plus community. Previously, she served as the National Young American Engagement Director for the Biden-Harris campaign. She grew up in Virginia, where she started volunteering on political campaigns in high school and has been organizing ever since. She worked on presidential campaigns for Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, and Elizabeth Warren, as well as at Next Gen America in New Hampshire, Virginia, and nationally. She's a graduate of Millbury College, and Hannah will be providing a deep dive into the American Rescue Plan and the relief it's already begun providing to our country and to New Hampshire in particular. Welcome, Hannah.
Thank you so much, Ed, and thank you to everyone for having me, and thank you so much, Dana, for sharing your story and opening this space. We, as someone who was living in New Hampshire at the start of the pandemic, I'm especially grateful to be in this space with all of you to be able to talk about the much needed relief that has been flowing into New Hampshire, and as well as one of our big priorities, which is making sure that people know about the relief that's available to them and are able to access these benefits, because there has been so much talk about some of the benefits like the $1,400 stimulus check, but there are so many more benefits that are available to people in terms of economic relief through the American Rescue Plan that we want to make sure that we're talking about, so that people know know what is available to them, and that help is here after what has been more than a year of incredible economic hardship and many other forms of hardship for so many Americans and so many Granite staters. So, as we all know, the COVID-19 pandemic and the corresponding economic crisis has undermined the health and economic well-being of American workers. We have millions of Americans, many of whom are people of color, immigrants, low-wage workers who have been continuing to put their lives on the line every day to keep the country functioning throughout the pandemic. And more than 9.5 million workers have lost their jobs in the wake of COVID-19, with 4 million out of work for half a year or longer. And without additional government assistance, the economic and public health crisis could drag on, and our national vaccination program wouldn't have been able to take off the way it has. And I hope that many of the people on this call are vaccinated. I just hit my 2-week full vaccination mark last week, and I'm extremely excited to be able to be moving back to normal, to a place where we can gather with our friends and families, where we can, where we're not constantly living in fear that we may not have another family member who is impacted by this virus. And so we're also extremely excited to be talking about the American Rescue Plan, which will change and has changed the course of the pandemic in many ways, and will deliver immediate relief to workers. It also builds a bridge to equitable economic recovery and immediately reduces child poverty. I think one of the pieces of this plan that to me personally is most exciting is the fact that passing it will lift more than 5 million children out of poverty this year and cut the child poverty rate by 50%. It's one of the most progressive pieces of legislation in history, with more than 2/3 of its tax cuts and direct payments going to families making less than $90,000 a year. So a couple of the key provisions, some of which have already been in the works, some of which we're continuing to get out the door. The first is mounting a national vaccination program to contain COVID-19 and safely reopen schools. We want to make sure that American workers don't have to lie awake at night wondering if they're going to make it home from work safely the next day, or if they'll bring home the virus to loved ones in their communities. We've had tens of thousands of people in New Hampshire alone vaccinated. And in terms of COVID relief, we have $1.4 billion in state fiscal relief and $439 million in local fiscal relief. A lot of this money has gone to providing supplies, emergency response, testing, and public health workforce to stop the spread of COVID-19 and distribute the vaccine as quickly and equitably as possible. And also to deliver community-based and culturally competent care. It's also provided nationally $130 billion to help schools serve all students, no matter where they're learning, to make sure that we're able to get students back to school as quickly as possible and as safely as possible, to ensure that our children aren't continuing to have learning gaps as a result of the pandemic. The second big provision and goal of the American Rescue Plan was to deliver immediate relief to American workers and families bearing the brunt of this economic crisis, and especially immediate relief to American women who've experienced the brunt of this crisis. So some key provisions within that, we've given working families $1,400 per person stimulus checks. We've extended current unemployment insurance benefits and eligibility to September 6th, saving 11 million Americans from losing benefits with additional supplements. And, in New Hampshire, more than 16,000 people have been unemployed as a result of the pandemic, and 82% of New Hampshire adults have received checks, including 74% of New Hampshire children. We are helping Americans stay in their homes by providing emergency aid to cover back rent, increasing the value of the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, SNAP benefits, increasing the child tax credit. We know that 19,000 adults in New Hampshire living with children reported that their children in their household don't have enough to eat, and 222,000 children will receive this tax credit to lift 8,000 children out of poverty, and that 24% of adults in New Hampshire can't afford to cover household expenses, with 15% of renters behind on rent when the American Rescue Plan was passed. So all of this plays into $21.5 billion nationally in emergency rental assistance to help, and nearly $10 billion to help homeowners who are behind on their mortgages. Some additional things in here: we are increasing the earned income tax credit for 17 million workers nationally by as much as $1,000, expanding child care assistance to help hard-hit child care providers cover their costs and increase the tax credits to help cover the cost of child care, to give families an additional tax credit to help cut child care costs, to provide an additional $1 billion to states to cover additional cash assistance for the temporary assistance for needy families TANF recipients, and also lowering and eliminating health insurance premiums for millions of lower and middle income families enrolled in the health insurance marketplace. And then the last big piece of this plan is supporting communities that are struggling in the wake of COVID-19. We know that millions of American workers reside in communities that suffered disproportionately in recent months. So this plan includes emergency grants, lending, and investments to hard-hit small businesses, emergency funding for state, local, territorial, and tribal governments to ensure that they can keep public workers on the job and paid to distribute the vaccine, as well as helping transit agencies avoid layoffs and service reductions. And we know that the American Rescue Plan has tremendous economic impact to so many families, but our work isn't done. We're continuing to advocate for the American Jobs Plan, for the American Families Plan, in terms of more, for ways to create these benefits in a more long-term way to continue to provide the long-term assistance that's needed for a lot of families to recover from COVID-19 and the subsequent economic challenges. And so thank you all I know that was a lot of numbers and that folks probably have questions, and we'll talk a lot more and put some more faces on what this really means with folks like Dana and other people who can really talk about these benefits and the experience that so many of us have had throughout COVID-19. But I'm very grateful to be able to be here. And I know, Ed, I think you have questions for me next.
Thanks so much, Hannah. You're jumping me, Hannah. We do have questions for you, but give me two more seconds. And a massive piece of legislation, layers and layers of good progressive policy. Up next, we're going to hear from State Senator Rebecca Perkins Kwoka, after which we'll have time for Hannah and Rebecca to answer some questions you may have. If Hannah's remarks have brought up any questions for you, please feel free to put them in the chat now. And after Rebecca speaks, we'll have about 10 minutes for both her and Hannah to answer questions from the audience. So Rebecca is a New Hampshire state senator representing the 21st district who has spent her life working hard and advocating for progressive change. She formerly served on the Portsmouth City Council and was the first openly LGBTQ+ woman elected to the New Hampshire State Senate. She was born and raised in New Hampshire and grew up in Stratton, where her family owned and operated the Exeter Dairy Queen. So many memories of the Exeter Dairy Queen. Perkins Kwoka is a graduate of Dartmouth and Cornell Law. Thank you so much, Rebecca. A few questions. What does the American Rescue Plan money mean for New Hampshire? Where can we not spend these funds? Where are you most hoping to see that money spent? And please feel free to speak to the connection to our housing crisis here in the state, given your background fighting for housing justice as a former city councilor in Portsmouth. And I can fire those back out to you in turn. But thank you so much, Rebecca.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for organizing this and for having me tonight, and to Dana so far for sharing your story. I think it's so powerful to lift each other up, through sharing our stories, through exposing the ways that, we've really now understood that our society, is structurally difficult for a lot of families and for a lot of individuals. And so I think this pandemic has really created an opportunity for a more open and honest space and look at, how our policies have gotten us here and where we can go from here. So I really appreciate being here with you guys tonight for a chance to reflect. Hannah touched on a lot of statistics that I was going to share with you guys about New Hampshire. And I think, it's really important from my perspective, just, having served at the local level and now serving at the state level, to think about, the ways that this aid really, its numbers and its percentages and its statistics, but it affects all of us. It affects our families and our daily life and the way that we can go about our lives. And so, there's a few things I want to highlight in here. One of the statistics that Hannah mentioned was $439 million in aid for local fiscal relief. And so I know in my district, that will be awarded for each of my 7 towns and cities. And, that's going to make a big difference in terms of budgeting what we can and can't do locally. And I know, for example, at the beginning of the pandemic, there was a lot of uncertainty about, for example, restaurants in downtown Portsmouth and sort of how our physical space creates a community that creates togetherness and creates support. And how can we as a community be there for those businesses in the ways that they also, help contribute and make our fabric. And so, local fiscal relief can provide opportunities for local grant making to those small businesses. In addition to, at the state level, it can provide opportunity to support them with outdoor seating. It can provide opportunity to waive permit fees so they can continue to operate. I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to sort of be creative in supporting our fellow community members in the ways that they've tried to keep their employees on payroll, find different services they can provide to keep people employed during this time, and really work together cooperatively and try to enter a new policymaking space, where we can kind of think about how to support each other. I also think it'll make up for some of the lost revenue that towns and cities are feeling, and in that way avoid, further job loss at the local level. So we have 800 public employees just in Portsmouth alone. And so providing the $439 million in local fiscal relief and $362 million in relief to our public schools across the state is going to help, keep our teachers employed, who we value so much and who have had such a tough year. It's going to help us support the education of our children and especially our teenagers, who we know have had a really hard year mentally, in returning back to school safely and providing our schools with the PPE, the social distancing, the physical space, the remote learning aspects, and all the things that teachers need in order to make sure that our daily lives as a community again can resume in this sort of collaborative and cooperative space that we, in some cases we're able to achieve, and maybe in this case we'll be able to improve as we move forward. So I think, in the big picture, what's clear is that a lot of places have been trying to survive, and I think Dana told us about that on a very personal level. I think so many people admire and feel that same spirit of, they're very grateful for what they've been able to have. They are thinking of others and how they can help them. But it's been really hard, and so I think at a time when I'm hearing from, you name it, small businesses, women who have not been employed for the past year, women who have had to make the choice not to be employed over the last year to support their families, small businesses that are on the brink of closing their doors because they haven't qualified for this program or this program or this program, employees who have repurposed themselves, to try to help their employer who's been working with them for the past 15 months. I hear these stories every day. Cultural centers that are trying to support AAPI community members, English as a second language learning centers. There's so many places and so many people in our communities that have really they felt the brunt of this past 15 months. And I think the American Rescue Plan really is coming at just such a time that it's desperately needed. And I just think will make such a real impact in people's lives. And lastly, I don't want to forget, that lifting children out of poverty is just such an important piece of this, and it really builds our future, and I hope that those children can grow up to understand that through this all, we worked together, we worked hard, we worked creatively, and from it we learned some lessons, and part of it was to support them and their role in our future society. And so hopefully they can become some of the change makers and join us on calls like this. But I think it just goes to show what a role government can have in making people's lives better, and that ultimately we all do better when we invest in each other and we work together. And so I think the American Rescue Plan is just such a great example of that.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. And now we're going to move into our question and answer phase. And our first question, Hannah, to you, but Rebecca, please, I would love to hear your take. How do you feel about the prospect of the American Jobs plus the American Families Plan passing as well?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important that the American Jobs and the American Families Plan pass. You know, a lot of my work is especially with the youth portfolio. It's an incredible investment in education in both of these plans, both in terms of the infrastructure investments for our schools and universities as part of the American Jobs Plan, as well as some of the tuition benefits to help make college, especially community college, more affordable to families as part of the American Families Plan. It's incredible the economic relief that's coming as part of the American Rescue Plan, but we want to make sure that we're getting the job done and able to lead towards long-term economic recovery. And it's incredibly important that the American Jobs and American Families Plan are passed as part of that.
Absolutely. The tuition benefits are, I'm sure a lot of folks on this call are super excited to hear about them. Rebecca, I'm sorry, what are your feelings about the prospects of these two major plans passing?
Yeah, I'm hopeful. You know, I think when you look nationally at support for these plans, for these stimulus plans, you know, there's a solid 2/3 majority of people who support aid for our economy across the country. And so while it may seem like a very close vote in Washington outside of the Beltway, you know, I think that amongst Democrats and Republicans alike, there's support for this kind of relief. And so my hope is that not only will Republican representatives listen to that, but that, you know, we'll have the votes to do this. And I know that's involves some procedural complications, like the vote that we had to take, you know, that Senators Hassan and Shaheen had to take on minimum wage, which was difficult. But I think ultimately the greater good of getting these packages passed is so important to so many people that I really hope we can see it.
Most definitely. Hannah, to you, a more technical question maybe. Are the expanded child tax credit and earned income tax credit in the American Rescue Plan permanent? And if not, can we make those permanent in the American Families Plan?
That is a quick answer, which is yes. The American Families Plan, the point of the American Families Plan is to help make these credits more permanent.
Awesome. I love quick answers. Rebecca, quickly to you. So curious, do you know how Granite Staters can get involved in directing the spending of these funds in our communities?
Sure. So there are some opportunities to do this locally. I mean, to some degree, there's going to be some discretional funds that city councils and boards of selectmen will be directing into their budget. You know, we do have broad discretion for municipalities to do that for a lot of the funds. And so being in touch locally is an important part. In some cases, we have at the state level anticipated that there would be further federal funding. And so we have legislation that directs the use of those funds. For example, I have a bill, SB 107, that ensures that some of the further relief funds that are received are directed to our newest small businesses because they were left out of our Main Street funding program. But you know, the answer to your question is that you can contact your state rep or state senator, you can contact your local city councilor or selectman, or at the state level, there's also an additional office called the Governor's Office for Relief and Recovery, and they call it GOFER, and it's an administrative agency set up technically in the governor's office, but I'm happy to connect you with them. And I've spent a lot of time corresponding with that office about, you know, intended or unintended consequences of the rules that they've set up for federal aid and ways that we can improve that on behalf of individuals that have reached out to my office.
That is really helpful. Please follow up. I'm sure folks in this call would love to know how they can, you know, advocate for their most fervent, you know, projects, be it housing or like you say, it's just incredibly important. Next,
Yeah.
No, please.
No, I don't want to interrupt you. I forgot to mention a couple of things that might be of interest to our audience, which is that in our first round of federal aid, there was $35 million, which was specially allocated to supporting housing that's been used for rental assistance. And mortgage assistance. And that's been available through grants through our community action programs, which are county-based. And so again, I'm very happy to connect anyone who's interested with more information there. And then another couple examples of legislation we have at the state level to direct these funds is there's a bill that Senator Whitley and I brought that directs funds to our smallest art venues. So those with capacity of 300 people or less, because obviously live performances and live venues have been really hard hit and are a huge, important part of not only our culture, but our economy. And so in Portsmouth alone, they're a $58 million driver annually and important members of our community that we value. And so that's another piece of legislation. And then Senator Prentice has one that directs them to our smallest enterprises. So there are other bills that I'm happy to fill people in on more, but I think, I would love to hear from you guys what your priorities are.
Yeah, most definitely. Hannah, to you quickly, do you have any sense on when and how funds will be dispersed to states?
Yeah, I actually think Rebecca might be able to speak to this more specifically about New Hampshire, but it depends. It depends on what the funds are for. So, we've been working, the administration has been working, depending on the funding and who is dispersing the funding to roll out that funding over time.
So Rebecca, right to you. Do you know how and when the funds will be dispersed to New Hampshire specifically?
Yeah, it's like Hannah said, it kind of depends, but we are expecting there's a couple programs that should be available and are available soon, like Save Our Stages at the federal level was one that opened for venues, first that had lost over 90% of the revenue, then 70% of the revenue. And so those funds, those rounds of applications closed in April. And so now funds are being dispersed in May. There's others that are specifically designed to support independent restaurants, and those are just sort of opening for eligibility for people to apply for. And then as far as the municipal aid, we've been notified about the amount. I don't have a specific timeline yet, but my sense is that hopefully those funds will be available in the next 2 to 6 weeks. But I just don't know.
And do you have a sense if there's a plan to maybe roll out a calendar or some kind of fact sheet where folks can maybe track where these pots of money are going?
Yeah, that's a great question. And at the state level, that kind of transparency is absolutely required. So any funds that are given in a discretionary manner to the state will absolutely need to be accounted for through that same office I mentioned, which is Gopher. And again, happy to connect anyone with that information as we go through that. I expect it will take a long time for all of that to get dispersed over the next year or so. So, I think it's something we should all keep track of. And then the aid that's going to municipalities and towns and cities, I think is going directly. And so you would just track that through your local city or town budget process, however you can do that.
That's really helpful. I foresee us all becoming very big Gopher fanatics in the upcoming months.
At least there's a useful acronym, right?
That's right. Well, thank you so much, Rebecca and Hannah, providing so much context and important information here. And next up, we're going to hear from another leader about how direct relief has impacted them. After which we'll have a group discussion to get us brainstorming together and envisioning how the funds from the American Rescue Plan should be utilized to benefit Granite Staters in the most equitable way possible. So next we'll hear from a local leader with the New Hampshire Youth Movement and a student studying political science at Plymouth State University, Jules Davis. Jules, are you with us?
Sure am.
Hey.
Hey, how's everybody doing? My name is Jules, and like Ed said, I'm going to be an intern with the New Hampshire Youth Movement this summer, but I'm also a college student at Plymouth State University, and I wanted to come onto this call and talk about the impact that the pandemic has had on college students and the future of college education. Unlike a lot of my peers, I was fortunate enough to receive a stimulus check each of the times that one was sent out. For me, this was instrumental in continuing my education. I lost my job last March, and if not for the checks, I wouldn't have been able to continue to attend college this past year. And it goes much further than that too. Groceries, car payments, medical expenses, all of these things I would have had a much tougher time paying for, if not for the fact that my tuition was partially covered by the stimulus packages. Now, most college students have to deal with these kind of expenses, and yet only a fraction of us got the help that we needed. And it's not like the schools that we go to are much help in supplying decent paying work to fill the gaps that were left behind by the collapse of the service industry. Most campus jobs at PSU pay $8.50 per hour, which isn't even enough to cover the cost of textbooks. And even the jobs that require certification and hours of training pay just an extra $1 an hour. So all of these problems that I'm describing outline a ton of different reasons to be excited about the American Rescue Plan and other massive federal spending packages to come. Biden's plan will allocate $40 billion towards higher education, half of which will go towards emergency student aid. Another one of Biden's proposals that we've been talking about tonight, the American Families Plan, would expand access to community colleges by making them tuition free to the public. This is great progress. I personally didn't think that I would see an American president push for universal access to community colleges in 2021. But as we all know, it's not enough. Students all over the country are drowning in student loan debt, and until their debt is relieved, most of them are going to struggle to get by. That's a huge problem for this state especially. Between our high property tax rates and how expensive school is here, it's no wonder that we lose more young people to out-of-state colleges than any other state in the country. When young people leave, they take the future with them. But I want to play a role in making sure that our state prioritizes the needs of young people here. And that's why we have to keep pushing. So I look forward to continuing to hold our governor and other state officials accountable to ensure that this money gets where it needs to go. And thank you all so much for having me on today and listening to what I have to say.
Thank you so much, Jules. I'm always super excited to hear from the youth vote. Incredibly strong in New Hampshire. Okay, so next we're going to turn into a group discussion. I'm going to ask all of you to kick your imaginations into overdrive for a moment. I want everyone to imagine that you are suddenly the mayor of your own town or city. What is the very first thing you would do with the funds coming into New Hampshire because of the American Rescue Plan? Everyone reflect on this for a moment, and I'd love to see your ideas in the chat. There are obviously no wrong answers here. Let us know what your top priority would be. And because our speakers are here, I'm going to put you in the hot seat. Rebecca, you first. What would you do with the funds coming to New Hampshire because of the ARP if you were the mayor of a town or a city?
Well, there's there's so many things. I think, because I'm a housing advocate, I tend to approach these things housing first. And, I think before the pandemic, we had an urgent housing crisis in New Hampshire. The pandemic has only made it worse. It has not made it better. And so keeping people in their homes allows them to focus on their family and their jobs and other aspects of the quality of their life. And so making sure that we've sort of fully addressed the need of renters to stay in their rental properties, which is something we've been also carefully working on at the legislature, ensuring that they have access to the aid programs that they need and they know about the funds that are available to them, and that we've, correctly sort of assessed where owners of homes are, and that we've been able to provide aid to people who need assistance to stay in their homes. I just think is fundamental to providing a foundation for people to think about other aspects of their lives that they still need to recover from. So that would be a place I would start. I've been reasonably pleased with the aid we've gotten so far, and I think it's been distributed meaningfully. But as we return to this sense of, oh, things are back to normal, I think there's a tendency of some policymakers to forget that this is an ongoing crisis for so many people. And so making sure that we keep our attention on that is really important. And then I would say right after that is getting women back into the workforce. So how can we support them, whether that's through childcare scholarships, whether that's through paid family medical leave, whether that's through supporting their employer in order to provide them with the flexibility they need to make work and family work. I think assessing those situations and where we're at is just such an important piece of this for me. And then lastly, I'd say our children, they're our future, and that includes our older children. We've talked some about higher education tonight, and I'm thrilled to hear some of the conversations around education nationally here in New Hampshire. We've got a lot to protect and improve. And so just making sure that, you know, UNH remains fully funded, that our community college systems remain fully funded, and if we can do even better than that, to see some tuition reductions to reflect just what a difficult year this has been for so many families to maintain the path they thought they were on. You know, I'd really like to see New Hampshire improve on that metric, which in my opinion, is the only direction we can really go. So, you know, I think those would be my 3 priorities.
Absolutely fantastic. I mean, Hannah, I have no idea how you're going to top that. But what if you were the mayor of a town or city? What is the first thing you would do with the funds coming into New Hampshire because of the American Rescue Plan?
I mean, I'm not going to top that. I think everything Rebecca said is incredibly important to highlight. But I would also add that I would make sure to invest in our vaccination strategy. I think making sure that everybody is able to be vaccinated and that we're able to get vaccines in a way that now that everyone is eligible, that everyone is able to actually access the vaccines and has the education and information that they need in order to be vaccinated is incredibly important in terms of our ability to get back to normal. And so I really would encourage folks, if you haven't been vaccinated yet, to go do so, and would make sure that that money was going to help the vaccination process.
Absolutely. If you haven't gotten vaccinated, please do so. Looking at the chat, affordable housing, healthcare, and food assistance. Angelina says, I would create an affordable Medicare for LGBTQIA+. Yes, ma'am. Portsmouth, affordable housing, tuition reduction, just so many that are on folks' list. Affordable childcare, that's absolutely right. Josie, pulling Ohio, absolutely not. Thank y'all so much for joining us in that thought exercise. Some really, really great ideas, and some that are at the top of all of our minds. And remember, while we're all not mayors of our towns and cities, we all have power and more power collectively to advocate for the funds coming into New Hampshire being put to the best use possible. And with that in mind, you'll see my colleague Josie putting a link to a survey in the chat. Please take a moment to add your feedback into that survey so we can get everyone's input on how to best participate locally in advancing a just recovery here in New Hampshire. So that should be in the chat for you right now. Take maybe 2 minutes to fill it out. It is really, really easy, really quick, very, very simple. It lists some issues there for you, so you could just, click the ones we have there, or add your own. As y'all are filling that out, we're going to hear from a final local leader, after which I'm going to let folks know about what actions they can take next and what events we have coming up soon. Next, we'll have Christina Darling, a single mom of 2 crazy boys in Nashua. She spends her days working in nonprofits for affordable housing and is here to share what this pandemic relief has meant for her family. Hey, Christina, are you with us? I think you just
looks like you just muted. There you go.
Now?
Yeah.
Hey, yeah.
Okay. Gotta love Zoom. Always something. So, hey, y'all. I just wanted to share with you my experience during this pandemic, specifically as it pertains to childcare. Picture this. May 2nd, 2020. It's a Monday morning. I'm starting a brand new job in a brand new field, getting to provide resources for families in affordable housing. My 3rd grader and my toddler were so excited for us and our future. Or by our future, I mean the pizza party I had promised for the first payday. May 9th, another Monday morning, the next Monday morning, and we're all now being told to stay home and that the schools are shutting down. Suddenly, I'm a work from home single mom of 2 boys, and they didn't understand that we were stuck home for health and safety. Remote learning became my own personal juggling nightmare. Being around someone 24/7 can become detrimental fast. I went from being a calm and fun, connected mom to being a screaming momster because I wasn't getting space from my boys. which they were feeding off of, and then spiraling into their own mini monsterhoods. Without any solid time to breathe or experience any form of autonomy, I wasn't able to regulate myself, let alone help them regulate themselves. For the next 105 days, I had to find a way to juggle taking care of myself, my kids, the house, remote learning, my brand new full-time job that had never been done remote before. And somehow I still had to do any necessity shopping with both kids in tow while desperately hoping my little germ factories wouldn't touch anything. I don't have friends or family in the area, and childcare and play groups were shut down, so I did it on my own. And speaking of shopping, boys will eat you out of house and home. While in childcare, both of my boys got breakfast, snacks, and lunch. Suddenly, I'm finding myself having to purchase and prepare these extra meals while juggling Zoom meetings. And it was stressful. And it was an additional financial burden I wasn't prepared to meet because, by the way, when I got this new job, I made just enough money that I lost my food stamps. So I didn't get to benefit from the extra food stamp money. There were times I didn't think we were going to make it. My work was so supportive from day one. They lessened the hours expected of me. They made my tasks easier. But at the end of the day, I needed to make money to pay my bills and survive. It's just my income. For the next 105 days, I answered countless what ifs. You know, is there a bug? What if a bug jumps on our planet and squishes it? What if the sun falls? All the while dealing with my own big what if. What if we don't financially survive this? We did survive, but only because on the 106th day, I was able to send both of my boys to their separate emergency childcare locations. My older son went to the Boys and Girls Club, and my younger son went to Marguerite's Place. For anyone who knows Marguerite's Place, they are wonderful. I would recommend them to anybody. Boys and Girls Club was more about affordability. For 3 months, I watched him get bullied by other kids. He lost interest in all the activities he normally loved, and suddenly he was becoming aggressive and mean at home. I couldn't pull him out because I needed to work and I couldn't afford to live anywhere else on my income. When I discovered the bullying my son was experiencing, it included the adults who are supposed to be taking care of him. I pulled him out and I got a second job to help pay for him to go to a better daycare during the day so I could work my first job. It took a few weeks on a wait list, but the YMCA has been awesome. They've bent over backwards to give him everything he needs. They've stayed on top of him for his remote learning, and they've given him outlets for his energy. The New Hampshire Child Care Scholarship covers a significant part of his care. And hold on one second. Yeah. Can you give me 2 minutes? I will get you in 2 minutes. We're teaching the 2-minute wait. Caden just said he would get you juice. Can you go help him? Sorry. Something about talking to a screen just calls kids right to you. Same thing with being on the phone. They run. So yeah, the Child Care Scholarship, it pays for a significant part of his care. And my cost share is high, but it's doable. But it's not in-person learning. I wish I could tell you that my now 4th grader is doing well back in person. He's not. Because due to the lack of after-school programs that were able to open as quickly as the school did, he's still doing remote learning at the Y and will be for the rest of the year. I'm still working a second job to pay for that care during the day rather than him going to school. These funds, these stimulus checks, they've been able to help me survive in a financial climate that I should not have made it in the first place. And I'm really hoping in the future to be able to see this money go towards things like affordable, doesn't even have to be free, but affordable and available daycare. Because if you want me to work, I need someone to watch them, or someone else can go find their fathers and ask them to do something. So that's my story. And I appreciate you all listening.
Thank you so much, Christina, for sharing with us. It is such a powerful story, and you are an amazing mom. And I know there are so many moms here tonight who connect with you, who see themselves in you. And thank you so much for sharing with us. Thank you so much. And okay, before we get into our calls to action and the next events we have coming up that you guys should definitely join in on, we want to take a quick Zoom poll here to see, you'll see it pop up on your screen in a moment. The question you'll see is, where do you want to see the American Rescue Plan money invested? There's a lot of options and you don't have to just pick one. We wanted to get a snapshot of where folks on this call's priorities are. Some of the options are affordable housing, K-12 education, lowering tuition at public colleges and universities, childcare, addiction treatment services, mental health services, climate change, climate adaptation, and other. I know you all are probably click all of these, but it's just really, really important just so we can see where folks are on the call. You'll see the results come in, give it a little bit of time. Y'all should see it. Oh, wow. Just a few more folks, maybe. $15 more seconds. There are like 5 folks who didn't vote, but I won't take it personally. It looks like affordable housing is the clear winner with K-12 education coming next, lowering tuition, childcare, addiction services. Share those results with y'all. Thank you everyone for sharing your priorities with us. Incredibly interesting to see the breakdown of the folks who participated. All right, y'all, we've learned a lot tonight, and I hope this event has inspired y'all to help educate your community about the American Rescue Plan and to stay involved in our ongoing work to win even bigger, bolder policies moving forward. For all of you young folks out there, I know I just said young folks, be sure to join New Hampshire Youth Movement next Wednesday, the 19th, for the Empower Hour at 7 p.m. This will be a social hour where y'all will use the innovative relation organizing app Empower to connect with friends and family about how the American Rescue Plan funds could change our community. Josie will drop a link for that in the chat now. Empower's a really cool app. I'm really excited for y'all to dig into that next Wednesday at 7 p.m. And next Thursday, the 18th, there are 2 events happening. Granite State Progress is hosting a phone bank from 6 to 8, and phone banks at the same time the following 3 Thursdays to reach out to Granite Staters and let them know of the expanded eligibility for ACA enrollment under the American Rescue Plan. These calls are an important way to ensure that those who are struggling can access more affordable health care. Each of these phone banks will be joined by a special guest each week to kick things off at the beginning. You can sign up using the link that Josie has pasted in the chat. Remember, those are next Thursday, the 18th from 6 to 8, and then the next 3 following Thursdays from 6 to 8, there'll also be phone banks by Granite State Progress. We also have candidate training next Thursday, the 18th. If you're interested or you're thinking about running for office, Rights and Democracy is hosting a virtual candidate training next Thursday evening from 6:30 to 8. I know a lot of events for y'all. You can find the RSVP link in the chat as well. It's a candidate training from Rights and Democracy next Thursday, the 18th, from 6:30 to 8 p.m. The week after next, the week of check my calendar, the 24th, join 603 Forward on May 27th to continue our discussion about the American Rescue Plan and to learn how you impact resources in your city or town by serving in local elected or appointed office. And you can sign up in the link that was just dropped in the chat. That's the week after next on May 27th, a discussion with 603 Forward about the ARP and how you can get involved in those distributions. And then finally, you can also look forward to running for another Run for Office 101 webinar on June 10th, where you can hear from a panel of young elected leaders and learn the basics of how to run for office. And you can sign up using the link that was just dropped in the chat. And that's on June 10th, a Run for Office 101 webinar. Really, really cool series. If you didn't fill out the survey we shared earlier yet to give feedback about the ARP funds and share your perspective and experience, but sure to do so. Josie's going to drop that link one more time for y'all. I know it's repetitive with these links, but please, it's incredible information. And these events really, really do help, make sure that this bill is every dollar is spent helping the folks who we've been talking about on this call, the folks you have talked to. Every dollar is meant to help them out, and we want to make sure it does. So thank you all so much again. Thank you to our leaders who shared their stories, to Hannah and Rebecca for providing such compelling and useful information for all of us. And of course, to our co-sponsors, 603 Forward, New Hampshire Youth Movement, Granite State Progress, and Rights and Democracy. On a personal note, thank you all for your time, your energy, and passion. I truly have enjoyed all of you. Have a great night, and please, please, please stay involved. Thanks, y'all.